Movies of 1999.
Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to episode 15 of the Movies of 1999, a podcast where we talk about a movie from 1999 each week as selected by Bingo Machine. My name is Jason Hutchins.
And I'm Craig Talbot.
And in this week's show, we are going to talk about the movie Eyes Wide Shut, which we watched at last week's movie night, and that was paired with the Thomas Crown affair for reasons that we will discover. Now, stick around at the end of the show when we'll be crossing live to this week's movie night to spin the bingo machine and find out which movie we'll be talking about next week.
I tell you what, there's a lot of opinion on Eyes Wide Shut. I think we'll get into it a little bit later, but the sheer volume of stuff on the internet written about Eyes Wide Shut is quite overwhelming.
I remember it making a big impact at the time. I think the first thing to talk about is why I selected Eyes Wide Shut as one of the A movies. And I have to say, I have to give it to the bingo machine and our guest bingo spinner, Melissa, because we asked for a single-digit, even number, and we asked for an action movie, I think, or a blockbuster movie. And I think the bingo ball did pretty well. It gave us number 4, and it gave us a movie with Tom Cruise in it. And you can't really ask for much more than if you're asking for a blockbuster and you get a movie with Tom Cruise in, I think it's done a pretty good job. So kudos to the bingo machine. But obviously I selected Eyes Wide Shut because it was a Stanley Kubrick movie, and how can you not have a Stanley Kubrick movie in the mix if one is released in the year? But the big question is, why was that paired with the Thomas Crown affair? So why do you think, Craig?
Well, I have a couple of theories. Both of them feature quite a fair bit of nudity. So
they do.
Yes.
Surprisingly so, the Thomas Crown affair is the second most nude film out of all the ones we've seen.
Yeah, definitely. And also, they're both set in New York. They're both thrillers. So that's my theory. There's certainly a lot of nudity in both of them, which is, especially for the Thomas Crown affair. I watched the 1968 version as well as the 1999 one. And they're very different films from that.
Yeah,
very different films. Anyway,
well, for me, the thread that connected them was James Bond, really. Because Pierce Brosnan was playing James Bond at the time, and our mate Tom Cruise is pretty much the American James Bond in the Mission Impossible movies, I think.
He has become that, yes.
So I think that's a nice little connection as well. So why don't we go with that?
There you go.
So before we start chatting about it in detail, let's go over to ChatGPT to read its synopsis of Eyes Wide Shut.
In Eyes Wide Shut, directed by Stanley Kubrick, we delve into the life of Dr. Bill Harford, played by Tom Cruise, who embarks on a surreal and unsettling nocturnal journey after his wife Alice, portrayed by Nicole Kidman, reveals her contemplations of infidelity. This confession propels Bill into a night filled with bizarre encounters and a secretive, ritualistic society, ultimately challenging his notions of reality, trust, and fidelity. The film navigates the complexities of desire, jealousy, and the hidden facets of relationships, culminating in a haunting exploration of the human psyche and the masks people wear.
And there you go, that's ChatGPT's synopsis. And Craig, I'm a little bit nervous about this because you did walk out of the movie night before this movie was over.
Yes, I did.
So what did you think of Eyes Wide Shut?
Look, honestly, I didn't enjoy this movie at all. I was bored stiff on the movie night, to be quite frank, and the first hour or so, it tries to be compelling, and I know it's a Kubrick movie, and I know he died 4 days after he did the final cut, and whatever. It's too long, and I remembered why I don't like Tom Cruise, because he's just, irritating in most of this movie.
Well, this was definitely Tom sort of period where he started doing independent or interesting movies, non-action movies, I suppose.
That's right.
So at some point, people were just waiting for him to run somewhere. because
Look, I think there was a review that I read which talked about the fact that Tom Cruise just basically ambled through the movie, but what he did was he allowed the female characters, the female actresses in the movie to shine, and their performances, particularly Nicole Kidman's, made the movie.
For
and
sure.
I think that's
sure.
very true.
Yeah, for sure.
Tom Cruise was just Tom Cruise. He wasn't particularly believable as a doctor. And I know this is a Kubrick movie, and my God, is there ever a lot written about this movie by people. If you do a search on Eyes Wide Shut, I watched it 100 times. You'll be quite shocked at the number of entries that come up. And I actually read an article by a woman who watched Eyes Wide Shut 100 times over 1 year. I question her mental health.
Well, maybe we can do that for next year's podcast.
No, I'm never watching this movie again.
Well,
anyway,
there was a comment on the movie night, because I know you say it's slow and everything like that, but there was a comment on the movie night that although not very much was happening, Kubrick has a knack for grabbing your attention just with the way that he films it. And I think some other members of the audience on the movie night experienced the movie like that, where it's quite compelling and you know you pay attention to it, just the way that he sets up the camera or I don't know what it is, but you kind of can't look away. And I agree about Nicole Kidman. She has 2 monologues that bookend the film pretty much, and they're very important to the story, and her performance is really good.
Yeah, look, I think there was a review that I read, and it said something along the lines of, let's have a look here. Here we go. Sarah Brinks from a website called Battleship Pretension. Never heard of it before or since, but anyway, she said it really well. Eyes Wide Shut is a beautiful film. The set design, costumes, actors, and cinematography, all beautiful. Kubrick's camera seems to seek out beautiful things. And if you look at it from the point of view of someone obsessively getting a movie perfect, this is an outstanding movie. If you look at it from any other point of view, look, it's not my kind of movie, clearly, but it was beautifully shot. It was beautifully acted. It was beautifully costumed. I just didn't really enjoy the premise of it. I didn't enjoy the story. It's not my kind of movie.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of the opposite. This is my kind of movie. There's something about the mystery of it. Basically, this movie is based on a story called Dream Story by an author called Arthur Schnitzler, written in 1926. I read the book during the week. It's only about 120 pages long. It's a novella. And this movie follows the story very closely. Kubrick did make some changes, but the essence of the story has been preserved, and a lot of the things, going to the costume shop where the guy has a young daughter who's in a tryst with these other guys, and then by the end of the movie he's actually selling his daughter to these other guys. You know, all of those things happen in the novel. The novel's called Dream Story, so it's about a dream that the wife has, but it's also about the dreamscape that the husband sort of is transported into after his wife opens up about her fantasy that she's had in her dream, which sort of rocks his world a bit. But he's almost transported to this other world, and there's quite a few clues in the movie about that. For example, the costume shop is called Under the Rainbow. So if you looked at it from the point of view of Over the Rainbow, so The Wizard of Oz, you know, Dorothy is being transported to another place where she learns lessons about herself. And that's exactly what happens to the protagonist in this movie. The fact that Tom Cruise sort of stumbles around for most of the movie is part of that, because he's in this other world and is experiencing all these nightmarish or these dream-like events that don't necessarily, like they aren't necessarily really happening. That's almost like just his imagination or his nightmare that he went through. So looking at the movie from that point of view makes it quite interesting, I think. And also comparing it to the book, the fact that it does follow the book so closely, so the source material.
Yeah, look, I think it's a beautifully shot movie. It's just, it's interesting. Roger Ebert wrote about this movie in Variety, and there was a big debate about this movie at the time, because in America, the version that we probably saw Well, certainly the version I saw after I walked out of the movie.
It was the American version, yeah.
I actually saw the European version.
Oh, you saw the uncensored version? Well,
I saw the uncensored
on the movie
version.
night, we saw the American version, so we had the people added to block out most of
right.
the,
So there was a big debate about that in America because of the ratings. They don't have the same ratings that we have in Australia. They're quite different. And there was a big feeling that in America it had to be an R movie, otherwise it wouldn't succeed. And the film studio wasn't happy about releasing it in the US unless it got down to an R level. So that's why all the extra black suited or black cloaked figures were added into the censored version. And Roger Ebert was quite passionate about this, and he basically said this idea of the NC-17 category, I submit the proof that this became an Austin Powers style digital peep show that Warner's imposed on Eyes Wide Shut. The studio tells us that Stanley Kubrick wanted it that way, but Jan Harlan, the film's executive producer, tells us that he and Kubrick would have preferred the original version. However, Kubrick and the studio were both committed to an R rating, and the article goes on quite a bit about the R rating and how difficult it is to get that in the US. Yeah. As I said, I actually watched the uncensored version.
Which is the version I would have seen back in the day when I saw it at the cinema. Yeah.
In Australia, the uncensored version was the version that was shown in the theatres. I think this movie, to be fair to it, I think in a movie theatre, this would have been much, much more impressive. I don't think even a large screen TV does it justice. It needs the movie experience to be really good.
Isn't it interesting how it was made? Because Kubrick lived in England. He wouldn't hop on an aeroplane. So they built a set of New York City, which kind of, it works in this movie because he is sort of going through this dreamscape. So the fact that it is like a dreamlike version of New York, not an authentic version of New York. But also he and Nicole Kidman, who were partners at the time, or husband and wife at the time, they signed a contract, an open-ended contract with Stanley Kubrick, saying that they will basically work on this film until Stanley Kubrick says that it's done. Do you remember how long the shoot was? Was it 9 months or it was?
So it's actually famous for how long the shoot was.
It's still the longest shoot ever, right?
It's one of the I don't know if it's the longest shoot ever, but it was certainly famous at the time.
It still is. It still is. The film's production at 400 days holds the Guinness World Record for the longest continuous film shoot.
Apparently so. Yeah, that was actually one of my factoids. You're stealing my factoids this morning, Jason.
Oh, it sounded like you were contradicting that.
No. I don't know if it still is. It was at the time. It's definitely in the Guinness Book of World Records at the time. I don't know if it still is. I didn't go down that rabbit hole. But it's interesting. The mysterious woman who is the voice in the movie is actually Cate Blanchett.
Yes.
Did you know that?
Yeah.
I thought that was cool.
That is pretty cool.
Abigail Good, who was the actual person, couldn't shake her British accent,
right?
And they wanted an American accent,
so they got an Australian to do it.
Yes, but after his death, Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman both suggested Blanchett, who happened to be in England at the time. Obviously, she's not American either, but she's very good with the American accent. We've heard her before in the other movie. As you mentioned, the movie is based on Traum Novelle, or Dream Story, as you called it, by Arthur Schnitzler. And I think the story was adapted by somebody else, though. Frederick Raphael and Stanley Kubrick adapted it to a screenplay. I thought the music by Jocelyn Pook, unusual name, but that's her name. She won a Golden Globe for her music in this film.
Is that also the piano, like that single note piano thing?
Yeah, that stuff. Yeah. And so she won a Golden Globe for that. And that certainly was a very striking part of the movie, and a very, if I can say so, a very Kubrick idea, totally. So she won a Golden Globe. That's the only award this movie won, was this Golden Globe. It did win a bunch of minor awards, but major awards, that's the only one that it won. On Rotten Tomatoes, it's interesting. This movie only had, at the time, a 75% and 74% rating by critics and user reviews, if you like. The movie cost $65 million to make, so probably one of the more expensive movies that we've watched. In the US, it made $55 million, but $162 million worldwide. Apparently, Kubrick's movies tend to be more successful internationally than.
Yeah, I remember the movie
in
being
America.
massive at the time. Yeah, like everyone was talking about it.
As I think we might have already mentioned, Stanley Kubrick actually died only 4 days after cutting the final version of a final version of the film, which he screened to the cast and crew, I believe it was. And his friends and family all claimed that Kubrick's death was completely unexpected and he never seemed to be in poor health while making the film. So he was pretty obsessive. I did just read an article a few minutes ago that suggested that Kubrick had crews perform a scene 95 times. It's one of the most takes ever recorded in a movie. It's one of the scenes where he's walking through a door, though we don't know exactly which scene it was.
Yeah.
But he made him do it 95 times. I'm wondering if it's the one where Tom Cruise walks through the door, in that orgy scene where he's wearing the mask and he walks.
You'd have to think it was a significant door walking scene, not like your everyday door walking scene.
Yeah, for 95 times, you reckon? Yeah, and the cast and crew were left wondering how many different ways a person could possibly walk through a door. So 95 times is a lot. I
wonder which take they used, whether they used take 95 or whether they used take 1 or 2.
The article that I read didn't record that, but yeah, that's a piece of information. Interestingly, the singing in the chanting in the movie. So the chanting at the mansion, loosely translated, means we still pray for the mercy, the life, the peace, the health, the salvation, the scrutiny, neglection and forgiveness of sins of God's servants, worshippers, almsgivers, benefactors of this holy site. So it was trying to give it a sort of religious feel. There's more. Apparently it was actually in Romanian, and then the vocal track was run in reverse, which is why it sounded so weird.
Yeah, that's like doubly weird.
Yeah, it's actually. I'm not going to try and pronounce it. I've got the Romanian here, but I don't know how to pronounce Romanian. The Romanian ties in with the origins of the book, though, because Romania was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So that does make some sense. I don't know if they still were in the 20s, probably not in the 20s, but they were before that. Yeah. Interesting little factoid. Stanley Kubrick and the director of photography, Larry Smith, who I think this might have been his first movie as a cinematographer, director of photography, because I can't find any credits for him before this time. They tested different film stocks and they finally settled on one particular one that Kodak had discontinued. But as a courtesy, Kodak offered to supply as many rolls of this film as would be needed for the project.
Yeah, that sounds like...
It does kind of give it...
That's classic Stanley Kubrick. He did that with Barry Lyndon as well. And he does like to use he doesn't like to artificially light a lot of his shots. So one thing that you'll notice with Eyes Wide Shut is it's set at Christmas and there's Christmas lights everywhere. And that's actually used as the main lighting for a lot of the scenes, and they use this film stock that allows them to shoot in very low light conditions. Yeah.
The golden sort of glow of the scenes in the ballroom at the beginning are actually apparently quite famous because of the way that they're lit and the way they come across on film. Because of that, because of the film stock that he used, as you say, and also because of the way it was lit. It was unique. And it is. It looks very different. The whole film has got like a golden glow to it pretty much all the way through, I think.
Have you ever seen Barry Lyndon?
I haven't watched Barry Lyndon, no.
Yeah.
The only Kubrick movies I've watched before that were the very famous ones, Clockwork Orange and obviously
Full Metal Jacket or 2001, Doctor Strangelove.
2001. Yeah, I haven't watched any of the other ones, but those two
they're all worth seeing.
Yeah. Look, I was very impressed with Clockwork Orange and also obviously 2001. I absolutely loved that movie. I watched it when I was much younger. But the other ones,
both fairly slow-moving movies as well.
Yeah, but that was like, as I said, quite a long time ago. Oh, look, 2001 is a difficult movie to watch now because of it's pretty ethereal, particularly at the end. It's a pretty different kind of movie. Look, as I said, I found this movie difficult to watch. I watched the rest of it later. Found myself getting pretty grumpy with Tom Cruise's character because I just couldn't understand why he was doing the things that he was doing.
He was in a dream. He was in a dream.
Yeah. Well, apparently he was.
Well, so that's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. And I think if you watch it with with that theory in mind, then the movie does make more sense.
Yeah.
Because all of his experiences, like you think about it, he and his wife confesses to him that she has had a fantasy about this person that she saw while they are both smoking, getting high. That is the moment where the dream begins.
Yeah.
His very first experience, like his wife says something to him about, he's a doctor, and she says something about him like, do any of your patients ever fantasize about you're a handsome doctor or whatever? And he sort of brushes it off. His very first experience after getting high and leaving the house is to go and see a patient that declares that she's in love with him. So it's exactly what his wife... So that's his dream beginning. And the whole movie from there is his dream experience, where he's basically dealing with all the things that his wife had confessed to him. So that's the way that I look at it, and it makes sense, I think.
Some of the analysis that I read suggested that he's a very naive man to not think that his wife... There was a lot of suggestion that this particular movie was about 30 years behind the times in terms of the way it portrayed the relationships between men and women, and particularly the sexual relationships between men and women. There was quite a bit of commentary on it being... One commenter said something along the lines that this movie is made by someone who hasn't been out of the house for 30 years, which is probably true in Kubrick's case, being a famous director. So that was pretty interesting. The number of factoids on this movie, honestly, I could go on about this one for hours, just from hours and hours. I did go down a little bit of a rabbit hole with the young girl, the young girl who's in the
costume store. Yeah.
Just because she looked very young, and I did
16 or something
to know. And she's only 16 in this movie. She's actually retired from acting. Now she retired in 2016.
She'd be 43 or 41. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, her name is Lili Sobieski, and when she appeared in Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut, she said that Tom Cruise was very kind and considerate, and that her most vivid recollection of the movie is of Kubrick, who obviously died soon after filming, and he seemed to genuinely hold something magic. So like all the cast and crew, felt that he had this magic about him. So look, there are lots of good things about this movie, but I don't know. I can't shake the feeling that it's just a movie that I wouldn't want to watch again. And Angie Erigo from Empire magazine, she says, while this is obviously a must-see for Kubrick acolytes, those with less lofty expectations should be prepared for an overblown effort imbued with Kubrick's uncomfortable personal vision conveyed with distinctive and stunning style. And I think that comment probably is close to how I feel about the movie. I think if you're someone who's really into Stanley Kubrick, this is, you have to watch it because it's his last movie.
Oh, there you go. So divided opinions on Eyes Wide Shut. I think the movie's aged well. I probably enjoyed it more than I did back in the day. I enjoyed the mystery of it and looking for the clues that he puts in, like the under the rainbow and that sort of stuff, and coming up with my theory about what was going on, to the point where I read a lot of analysis and read the book that it was inspired by. So good movie from my point of view. So, Craig, before we move on to the Thomas Crown affair, what's that I hear? Is it time for intermission?
Intermission. All right, this is a complete U-turn, shall we say, from the previous topic. So this week we are going to look at Bob the Builder, Jason. Bob the Builder. I thought we could do a children's TV series to bring some light and enjoyment into this.
I don't know.
So anyway, let me get going. Welcome to the intermission this week, everyone. Here we delve into a non-movie topic each week that held significance in 1999. And this week, we're revisiting a TV show that marked the beginning of a new era for my baby daughter and myself. The year we started our journey of watching kids' TV shows together, which I'm still doing because my son still watches kids' TV shows. One such show that captured our hearts was the immensely popular Bob the Builder. which made its debut on the 12th of April 1999, and that was yesterday, 25 years ago. In Australia, it premiered on ABC Kids between the 20th of September and the 6th of October in 1999, so that's why I picked it. For those people who don't know anything about Bob the Builder, and I'm sad if that's the case for you, Bob the Builder is a children's television show that follows the adventures of Bob, a skilled general contractor. Alongside his trusty colleague Wendy, Bob takes on various construction projects, demonstrating the power of positive thinking, problem solving, and teamwork. The show features an endearing cast of anthropomorphized work vehicles. That made a lot more sense when I wrote it
I think.
than it did when I read it. Yep. Work vehicles,
Anthropomorphized.
Anthropomorphized.
They have human-like qualities.
They do. They have human-like qualities. So there's Scoop, the enthusiastic backhoe, Muck, the energetic dump truck, Dizzy, the teenage and silly cement mixer, Rolly, the friendly steamroller, and Lofty, the cautious crane, who always says, "Oh, I think so."
But also there's Shifter the forklift, isn't there?
No, there's no forklift, Jason.
Shifter the forklift.
No, you made that
Look
one.
it up.
No, I think that might have been in the CGI version, but we're not talking about that because that was terrible. Now, I'm talking here about the original stop motion version, which is the
stop
only
motion,
one that
yes.
actually matters. Yeah. They tackle challenges, repair mishaps, build structures while emphasising conflict resolution, cooperation, and essential life skills, which is all very good things. I'm following the order here when I'm talking about the series that I watched of how the show aired in Australia. It aired differently in the UK and US. According to a fan site, ABC would have followed the UK production schedule, not the airing order. So in the UK and US, they moved the episodes around, but they actually shot them in one particular order, which is the way the ABC did it. And I'm relying on... There are fan sites for Bob the Builder.
I was going to say, and they tell you the correct order, do they?
They do.
So that you get the proper story.
Sadly, the official Bob the Builder website, Jason, you can't get to it anymore because it's a Flash site.
All right.
And it's not available anymore. Well, you can go there, but it doesn't work.
You can plug in for your browser that will play Flash files.
Yeah, it's much harder to do, and I didn't have the time. So this is the original stop motion show, as I mentioned, and it was much loved in my household. I watched actually 3 episodes from the first season this week, and my whole family stopped and watched some of it with me. The first episode, Pilchard in a Pickle, introduces the yard cat Pickle.
Oh, there's a cat. Does he feed him?
There's a cat.
Does Bob the Builder feed him?
Yes, he does. Who ends up where she shouldn't, but is luckily found before any harm is done. So, yes, the cat does get fed, Jason.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And her mother was run over by a
forklift.
black car?
No, it's not. In the second episode, we meet Muck in Muck Gets Stuck, the dump truck who was afraid of the dark, but he eventually overcomes his fears to get out of the tunnel. And I also watched the third episode as well.
When Bob enters a dreamscape.
No, Jason. No, none of that. Let's not go down there. Look, the whole show is meant to be friendly to kids and teaching kids, life skills about how to do.
Can we fix it? Was the catch cry, wasn't it?
Yeah. I did ask our dear friends for some advice about Bob the Builder, but they weren't very helpful this week.
What did they say?
No, I'm not going. They were very unhelpful. Let's just go there. Did you ever watch Bob the Builder?
Well,
Jason?
the thing is, like you say, the show came out in 1999. My kids weren't born until 2006 and 2009. So we were watching kids shows like a decade after that. And Bob the Builder had disappeared from the radar. So we were watching In the Night Garden, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, Yo Gabba Gabba and things like that. So there wasn't any Bob the Builder. So
Bob the Builder was popular for quite a long time, but you're probably right. ABC Kids does rotate around these shows quite a lot. I remember watching it fairly recently. They're all on YouTube now, which is pretty amazing. So look, it's just something that I remember watching, and as I said, I particularly remember watching it with my kids. And look, Sarah was only born in 1999, so I definitely watched it with my kids. After that,
I've always really liked stop motion, that style of animation, and this transition where some of the shows switched to using CGI is just awful, isn't it? Where they try and retain the stop motion aesthetic, but they do it all with computers. It's just not the same.
The problem with Bob the Builder is it relied very heavily on the sort of expression and the magic of the stop motion. There was something about the stop motion which
Yeah.
gave all of the characters a bit of character, is the only way I can really put it. And when they transitioned over to CGI, they just lost that
Yeah.
completely.
Same with Thomas the Tank Engine.
Yeah, I haven't watched Thomas the Tank Engine's CGI versions, only the earlier ones, and it's a similar sort of thing. We could go on about Thomas the Tank Engine, but we won't. So yeah, so that's any. I really enjoy it. I just thought we'd do something a little bit different.
Alrighty, thanks very much for that. So that was our intermission, and next we're going to move on to talking about the Thomas Crown Affair. So let's go over to ChatGPT for the synopsis.
In the 1999 film The Thomas Crown Affair, directed by John McTiernan, we follow Thomas Crown, a billionaire art thief played by Pierce Brosnan, who orchestrates a daring daytime heist of a priceless Monet painting. Enter Catherine Banning, portrayed by Renee Russo, an intelligent and seductive insurance investigator determined to prove Crown's guilt. As the cat-and-mouse game unfolds, their intense attraction leads to a complex relationship where deception and romantic intrigue intertwine, blurring the lines between adversary and accomplice. The film is a stylish blend of suspense and romance, culminating in a clever battle of wits that keeps the audience guessing until the very end.
And that was the synopsis. And Craig, what did you think of the Thomas Crown Affair?
I really liked this movie. I actually really, really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was really good. I actually, as I mentioned to you in the preamble, I think it was, I can't remember if this is on record, but I watched the 1968 version.
Which Faye Dunaway was also in, right?
Yes, she's in both. And look, the 1968 version I would recommend to people just because it's so much more classy. It uses a lot of film techniques that were very common in the 60s. It's got these little cutaways where they have the different characters who are going to the heist.
Right.
These little square cutaways on the screen. So like there's just these little segments on the screen. That was quite famous at the time.
And the heist in the original was a bank robbery, was it?
It's a bank robbery in the original one.
And the remake, it's an art heist, yeah.
That's right. So the stories are actually both similar and quite different at the same time. They made some quite interesting changes to this particular movie for the 1999 version. So this movie cost $48 million to make. So another fairly big budget movie for the time. But it did make $124 million worldwide. So it was a pretty popular movie. It scores on Rotten Tomatoes roughly around about the same as our friend Eyes Wide Shut, interestingly. 69%. And the audience score is 77%. So it's held up over time. This is John McTiernan, who is the director here, and Pierce Brosnan was one of the producers. And as you mentioned, I think he was transitioning away from James Bond. I think he was still officially with James Bond at this time, but he was starting to transition.
He was still with James Bond because a factoid about this movie is he couldn't wear a tuxedo because the James Bond contract forbade him from doing that.
Yeah, he had to wear a slightly different... He couldn't wear a tie, so he had to wear his tuxedo without a tie.
Yeah.
Yes, I've got that in my little factoids here.
Another spoiler.
Yeah, I know, I've spoiled my factoids again. One of the reviews that I read, I think this is from Variety magazine actually, say that the characters in the Thomas Crown Affair are cool, but they're too cool, in fact, for the film to develop too much of a pulse. Variety was actually pretty hard on this movie. This redo of Norman Jewison's 1968 hit is an ultra slick thriller, and it attempts to justify its existence by shifting the focus from the caper elements to the psychological and emotional factors that compel two hard-shelled professional adversaries to risk romantic entanglement. I think the movie is more of a romance than the original movie is.
And that's where it lost me a little bit because John McTiernan, he directed Die Hard, classic movie, and a classic movie that starts with a heist as well.
Yes.
And the opening heist to the Thomas Crown Affair is really well done. Really, it's great to watch. And you sort of think you're going to watch one sort of movie and then it pivots to be more of a romance movie. So that's where it lost me a bit. I love the opening heist. I thought it was great, yeah. Although unrealistic, Great, though unrealistic, because they squeeze 4 men into this fairly slender horse-like statue or something. But also,
very uncomfortable.
Also, he steals the painting by putting it in a briefcase, and the painting is twice the size of the briefcase. They quickly show him putting it into some sort of contraption and folding the briefcase and then walking out with the briefcase, somehow not damaging the painting in the process. It was completely
I noticed that as well.
So
I noticed that as well.
But apart from those two caveats, the opening heist is just worth watching. But
yeah, considering it's framed in wood, and he does take the outer frame off, the inner frame is still
stays on. Yes, yeah.
These days they just cut the. It very often happens when these things are stolen. They just cut them off the frames.
Because then you can roll it up or something, but he doesn't do that.
Yeah. At New Norcia, that's what they did. They had a whole bunch of art stolen at one point, and all of the paintings were cut off the frames. Anyway, so that was a little bit odd. There's a lot of suspension of disbelief in this movie because there's quite a lot of. I thought it was well done. It was interesting to watch the two movies together and see what they kept and what they changed.
Yeah.
So, for example, in the original movie, there's a polo scene where they're playing horse polo,
right.
which is cut and they go catamaranning instead. The golf scene, which I didn't really understand in either of the movies, because it kind of is trying to make him look like he's a really, carefree, careless kind of guy with his money, I think is what the point of it was.
Yes.
But they kept it in both movies, and in neither of them I thought it was particularly...
Because he makes a bet. He wagers like $100,000 on chipping out of the bunker. And apparently Pierce Brosnan had a lot of golf training for the role because he's not a golfer, but he still looks like he can't hit a golf ball.
And he hits the ball very badly.
Yeah.
That's what kind of confused me a little bit. Yeah, Rene Russo apparently did her very first nude scenes of her career in this movie, and not only these, she did quite a lot of them in this movie.
They were both in their 40s, yeah.
Yeah, they were both nude or half nude for a fair bit of this movie. I thought the guy who played Detective McCann was pretty good. I liked him, Dennis Leary.
Oh, yeah, good. No. I really dislike Dennis Leary. Far out.
Oh, no, I thought he was good in this.
Do you not know who Dennis Leary is? He's a comedian.
I know who Dennis Leary is.
Well, I will never forgive him his song "I'm an asshole" going to number one
see,
on
now
the
I love
hottest
that
100 in like '93 or something. My God!
Yeah,
and
it got played a lot.
I think he's fairly wooden, and he was in a couple of movies around this time period, and then he stopped doing movies. But apparently, he did a TV show about firefighters that ran for like 5 or 6 seasons. And during September 11, he actually drove a fire truck as part of the rescue operations. So you've got to give it to him for that. He was a bit of a hero. I just don't like him as an actor. I don't think he works.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought he was pretty good. I thought the sequences in Martinique were pretty good. I mean, the rest of the movie is set in New York. Apparently, the Metropolitan Art Museum wouldn't let them film inside the museum itself, so they only filmed outsides. The insides were actually filmed at the New York City Library.
And it looked good.
They did,
The
and they were
really
very
good.
well done. Yeah. So that's apparently the New York City Public Library or something. Because they weren't allowed to film in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which I guess is kind of fair given some of the stuff that they were doing. I actually really genuinely enjoyed this movie. I enjoyed the plot and the story. I hadn't seen the 1968 version until after. So there was a bit of, I really enjoyed it from that. I enjoyed the whole thing. Wasn't really quite sure where it was going to end up completely until the end. So I enjoyed this movie. I thought this one was good. I actually, to be honest, this is one of those ones where it being on the B list kind of puzzles me a little bit because I actually think this is a better movie than the other one. I know Kubrick's got the name on the other one, but I think this is a far better movie for me.
Yeah, no, for me it's the opposite. Yeah. It was good to see Mark Margolis in a movie again. So he was the forger in prison. So we'd previously seen him in Mickey Blue Eyes, and I like half expected Mickey Blue Eyes to pop up in this movie as well, given that it was about artworks and things like that. You can imagine an auction with Mickey Blue Eyes coming out and auctioning off some of the artwork. So I reckon time for a mashup.
Yeah. It was interesting they had James Sato as Paul Cheng, who is the Thomas Crown's servant in the movie. It was interesting to see Faye Dunaway in the movie again as the psychiatrist who Thomas Crown reveals his innermost thoughts to, his weaknesses to. I thought that was pretty cool that they got her in. One of the things that I noticed between the two movies is the score, or the composer for the movie, Bill Conti, did a reasonable job in the 1999 version. The 1968 one is just cool. It's just like a really cool soundtrack.
Okay.
Like a 1968. When I say cool, I mean a 1968 version of cool. But, like the whole movie has just, I said to Simone when I watched it just has so much more class than the 1999 version. It's just very classy. Probably dated in that sense, but very classy. Everyone's wearing hats and all this sort of stuff. It's very classy and cool, sunglasses, all this sort of stuff. It's just a much more classy feel to it than the 1999 one. But look, I think both movies good in their own right. I enjoyed watching both of them, to be honest. I spent probably more time on Thomas Crown this week than I did on Eyes Wide Shut. Yeah. But I enjoyed it. You didn't like it much? Or?
Well, I love the opening heist, and then the movie dropped away when it switched to being a romance, and I kind of stopped paying attention to it. And I think also the Dennis Leary factor, he sort of rubs me the wrong way. I'm not sure why, but yeah, so that's the Thomas Crown affair on my B list for personal reasons, I guess. So let's go now over to this week's movie night for the rolling of the bingo ball. Craig, what numbers are we going to look for this week? Do we still want a single-digit number? Do we still want an even number?
I think we're still looking for some.
Any genre of film that you want to see?
I think we're still looking for even numbers, aren't we? Yeah. Look, there are some still pretty big movies to.
I wouldn't mind something science fiction-y. We haven't really had anything in that genre.
No, we haven't had anything like that at all.
Let's cross over live now and see what the bingo ball gives us this week. Okay, so here we are at the movie night. It's all happening. We've got Dana back into the bingo machine after Melissa subbing out for a couple of weeks. We're still looking for a low number, an even number, and the ball is out. And what is it? It's 29. 29. So well, it's a prime number. So 29 is American History X.
What?
Look, I told you I don't want you all coming up here to see me.
I don't care what you told me, okay?
I'm trying to get through this and you're just making it harder.
You think you're the only one doing time, Derek? You think I'm not in here with you?
He was his mother's hope.
He's gone. You don't know the world your children are living in.
His father's legacy.
It's everywhere I look now. What? This affirmative black shit.
The white man marches on!
See this? That means not welcome.
And his brother's hero.
I trust you, Derek.
Drop your weapon! All that anger, all that hate.
Has anything you've done made your life better?
Derek Vineyard was released from Chino early this morning. Hey, man, how you doing? Too big to give me a hug?
Oh, it's good to see you. Check this out, man.
When'd you get that? What?
Well, I came to talk about Danny. He's headed right where you are.
What's wrong with you?
Let the kid alone. He thinks the joint messed with your mind.
Did.
I'm asking you to do whatever's in your power.
You know what you can do? You can get me shot by a bunch of white boys. I am out, and Danny is out too. And if you come near my family again, I will feed you your heart.
What's happening, Dad? I don't think you realize what's been going on here. We are 10 times what we were.
They're after you, man. They're gonna come for me. They're gonna come for me. There ain't nothing I can do. Hey, Danny!
Get it!
I love you, and you're my best friend. And I'm not telling you what to do, but I need you to understand.
So that has been paired with Crazy in Alabama.
Growing up in Alabama, my brother and I were raised by my mama's family. Aunt Arlene was always ready with a hug.
Oh my God.
Whether you were ready or not. And Uncle Dub was the closest thing we had to a father.
They're it.
But my favorite was Aunt Lucille.
This is my big break. This is Hollywood.
What does Chester say about all this?
He said, shut your mouth, Lucille. You're not going anywhere.
Unlike most folks, she was determined enough to follow her dream.
All I know is you only got one life, Pecho. You can't sit around waiting for your next life to start.
You must be crazy, Aunt Lucille. And brave enough to take a chance.
You going out there to be a movie star? I hope you know how to wait tables.
Aunt Lucille, are you okay?
Oh, I'm fine, Pecho. I'm free. For the first time in my entire life, I'm free.
I like to think it was her courage that helped both of us through the craziest summer of our lives.
Who let you boys in the pool?
You ain't nothing but a big old wolf, Dave.
After my eyes have seen the years and the slow parade of tears.
He fell. It was an accident.
I want to understand.
What kind of trouble are you in, honey?
What'd I do?
You killed Taylor Jackson.
Who else you tell that to?
Nobody. Not yet.
You could stop the sheriff if you tried.
You don't know he's responsible for this. No one saw what happened.
I saw.
Dear Pecho, I don't really know that much about gambling,
The boy will have to testify.
No, I don't want him involved.
but sometimes in your life, that's just what you have to do.
There are times it's hard to know for sure what the right thing to do is. But Aunt Lucille showed me you can't go wrong if you follow your heart.
They cannot see the sky.
Columbia Pictures presents Melanie Griffith in the directorial debut of Antonio Banderas.
Lord, you are something fearless. You can believe you take after Aunt Lucille.
Crazy in Alabama.
So there you go. Thanks for that, future Jason. Did we get a science fiction movie? Was it a low number, a single-digit even number? Only time will tell. Craig, any final words before we wrap this one up?
No, just looking forward to see what we end up with this week, I guess.
Can you guess what Margaret and David gave Eyes Wide Shut?
No, not at all. They probably quite liked it, I would have thought.
So we'll leave the final word to Margaret and David, and until next week, that's goodbye from me.
Goodbye, everyone.
In the 13th and final film directed by Stanley Kubrick, Eyes Wide Shut.
The theme of living a double life is familiar from other Kubrick films, and so are the carefully framed and lit images, the very leisurely pacing, and the bold use of music. Tom Cruise successfully tackles his most complex role to date, but Nicole Kidman steals the film in an agonizingly true performance. Margaret.
I think she's wonderful, but I think Tom is too, you know? I mean, I think you're with him every moment of the film. His pain, his fear, his confusion. I think it's a wonderful performance. I love the fact that Kubrick has focused on intimacy. It causes ripples on your nerve endings that go on and on and on.
What would you give it?
5 stars.
5 from me too.
Who's got the ticket for a trip back in time to the movies of 1999 when everything was fine? Jason and Craig will take you for a ride on a podcast journey through the movies that collide. We'll dive into the flicks that define the year, from mind-bending thrillers to comedies to cheer. Jason's got the knowledge and Craig's got the win. Together they're gonna bring you film history. Bit by bit. Lights, camera, 1999. Let's rewind. Jason and Craig. They got the movies on their mind, from The Matrix to Fight Club. They'll inspire you on the movies of 1999. The flames grow higher.
Bob the Builder. Can we fix it? Yes, we can. And you're going to put that in the end of the...
Lights,